Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel. I am 24 years old, and I come from a small city where English was just another school subject, nothing more. If you had met me 1 year ago, you would never believe I could speak English confidently, because back then, I couldn't. I knew some grammar rules, I knew basic vocabulary, I could pass written exams, but speaking? That was my biggest fear. In school, English meant memorizing verbs, filling blanks, and translating sentences. I was actually good at that. My grades were always high. My teachers said, "Daniel is good at English," but they never asked me to speak freely. And when I had to, I froze. I remember one specific moment at university. We had a guest lecturer from another country. At the end of the presentation, he asked, "Does anyone have a question?" I had a question, a very good one. I practiced it in my head in my native language, but when I tried to convert it into English, my mind went blank. My heart started beating faster. What if I pronounce something wrong? What if everyone laughs? What if he doesn't understand me? So I did what I always did. I stayed silent. After the lecture, one of my classmates asked a question in simple English. It wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, but the lecturer understood him and answered warmly. And I remember thinking, I know more grammar than him, so why can't I speak? That question stayed with me. Outside of university, it was the same. When tourists asked for directions, I avoided eye contact. If someone spoke English near me, I pretended to check my phone. If there was a group conversation in English, I listened quietly and prayed no one would ask me anything. The truth is, I was embarrassed. Not because I didn't know English, but because I was afraid of sounding stupid. I was afraid of making mistakes. I was afraid of judgment. So I built a habit of avoidance, and avoidance became my comfort zone. I told myself, I don't really need English. I'll work locally. It's not that important. But deep inside, I knew that wasn't true. Every time I saw opportunities online, international internships, scholarships, remote jobs, I felt something heavy in my chest. I wanted those opportunities. But I also knew something was missing, and that missing piece was confidence in English. At that time, I didn't know that very soon, life would force me to face this weakness, and that moment would change everything. A few months after that university lecture, something happened that forced me to face the truth. My university announced an international scholarship program. Students could study abroad for 1 year at a partner university in Europe. All expenses paid, tuition, accommodation, even a monthly allowance. When I read the email, my heart started racing. This was not just a trip. This was a life-changing opportunity. Better education, international experience, a stronger resume, and maybe a different future. The requirements were clear. Good academic record, motivation letter, interview in English. The last part made me uncomfortable, but I told myself, it's okay. My English is not that bad. I spent days writing my motivation letter. I edited it carefully. I checked every sentence. I used grammar tools. I made sure it sounded perfect. And then I submitted my application. 2 weeks later, I received the email. Congratulations, you have been selected for the final interview. I was excited, but also nervous. The interview would be online. A panel of 3 professors from the partner university, native English speakers. For the next few days, I tried to prepare. I reviewed possible questions. Why do you want this scholarship? What are your future goals? How will this program help your career? In my head, I answered them perfectly. But something felt different when the real day arrived. I logged into the meeting. 3 faces appeared on the screen. They smiled politely. One of them said, "Good afternoon, Daniel. Thank you for joining us. His English was clear, but fast. Faster than I expected. They asked the first question. Can you tell us about yourself and why you believe you are a strong candidate for this program? I understood the question. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. But when I opened my mouth, the words didn't come. I started, "Yes, I am. I study engineering, and I very like research." I heard my own voice shaking. My grammar was broken. My sentences were short. I stopped in the middle of thoughts because I didn't know how to continue. I tried to translate in my head, but translating made everything slower. One of the professors repeated part of the question, maybe trying to help me. But that made me more nervous. My mind felt heavy. I could feel the silence between sentences. And silence in interviews feels very loud. They asked another question about my future plans. Again, I had ideas, but I couldn't express them clearly. At one point, I simply said, "Sorry, my English is not very good." They smiled kindly, but I already knew. The interview ended politely. "Thank you for your time, Daniel. We will contact you soon." When the meeting closed, I just stared at my laptop screen. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel surprised. I felt small. 3 days later, I received the email. "We regret to inform you." I didn't even finish reading the full sentence. I closed the laptop. I went outside and walked alone for almost an hour. Not because I didn't deserve the scholarship, but because I wasn't ready. Not academically, but linguistically. That day, I stopped lying to myself. English was not just a subject. It was not just a skill. It was a gate, and I was standing in front of it without the key. That rejection hurt, but it also woke me up. For the first time in my life, I didn't say, "Maybe next time." I said something different. "I will not let this happen again." And that decision became the beginning of everything. After the rejection email, I told myself something very clearly. I will improve my English. But wanting improvement and knowing how to improve are two different things. At first, I did what most people do. I went back to grammar books. I opened old notebooks from school. I started reviewing verb tenses. Present simple, present continuous, past perfect, conditional sentences. I told myself, maybe my grammar is weak. I just need to study more rules. So every evening, I studied grammar for 2 hours. I did exercises. I filled blanks. I corrected sentences. On paper, everything looked correct. But something strange happened. When I tried to speak, nothing changed. I still hesitated. I still translated in my head. I still felt nervous. Then I thought, maybe I don't know enough words. So, I downloaded vocabulary apps. Every day I memorized 20 new words. Ambition, achievement, opportunity, determination. I wrote them down. I repeated them. I even tested myself. But 1 week later, when I tried to speak about my goals, I forgot half of them. And even when I remembered the words, I didn't know how to use them naturally. Then I tried another method. I started watching random English videos on YouTube, motivational speeches, interviews, travel vlogs. I told myself, if I just listen a lot, I will improve automatically. But I was passive. I watched like entertainment. I didn't pause. I didn't repeat. I didn't speak. After 1 month of studying, I tested myself. I recorded my voice answering a simple question. Why do you want to study abroad? And when I listened to the recording, it sounded almost the same as my scholarship interview. Slow, broken, full of hesitation. That was the moment I realized something important. The problem was not grammar. The problem was not vocabulary. The problem was that I was not training the skill of speaking. It was like trying to learn swimming by reading books about water. I knew English, but I couldn't use English. And there is a big difference. I was building knowledge, but not building ability. And ability only comes from practice, real practice, active practice, speaking practice. That night, I stopped studying in the traditional way. No more long vocabulary lists, no more grammar exercises without context, no more passive watching. Instead, I asked myself a different question. If I had to rebuild my English from zero, what would I actually need? Not to pass exams, not to impress teachers, but to communicate confidently. That was the moment I decided to create my own system. A system focused on speaking. A system focused on thinking in English. A system focused on daily action. I didn't know exactly how it would work yet, but I knew one thing for sure. If I continued doing what I had always done, I would continue getting the same results, and I was tired of being silent. So I made a new rule. From now on, English would not be something I study. It would be something I use every single day. After I decided to stop using traditional methods, I asked myself one simple question. What do I actually need to say every day? Not advanced vocabulary, not academic essays, just real-life sentences. So on the first day of my new system, I sat down with a notebook and wrote 50 survival sentences. Simple sentences, useful sentences. For example, "Hi, how are you? Can you repeat that, please? I don't understand. Could you speak more slowly? Let me think for a second. I agree with you. I'm not sure about that. In my opinion. I would like to apply for this program. I'm interested in learning more. Nothing complicated." But these were sentences I would actually use in conversations and interviews. Every morning, I read those 50 sentences out loud. Not once, not twice, 10 times. The first few days felt strange. My tongue felt heavy. My pronunciation was inconsistent. Sometimes I stumbled over simple words. But something interesting happened after 1 week. The sentences started to feel automatic. I no longer had to think before saying, "Can you repeat that, please?" It came out naturally. That small change gave me confidence, but I didn't stop there. The second habit I built was speaking to myself. Yes, out loud, every day. At first, it felt ridiculous. I would walk around my room and describe what I was doing. I am opening the window. The weather looks cloudy today. I need to finish my assignment before 5 p.m. When I made coffee, I said, "I am boiling water. I'm adding sugar. I prefer strong coffee." When I was tired, I said, "I feel exhausted today, but I still need to practice." No one could hear me. No one could judge me. That was my private classroom. After about 10 days, something started to change. My brain began forming English sentences faster. I was no longer translating every word from my native language. Sometimes, simple thoughts appeared directly in English. That was a breakthrough. Then I added another powerful habit, recording my voice. Every evening, I chose one simple topic. For example, describe your day, talk about your goals, explain your favorite movie. I recorded myself speaking for 5 minutes without stopping. The first recordings were painful to listen to. I paused too much. I said and constantly. My pronunciation was inconsistent, but instead of feeling embarrassed, I analyzed myself. Where did I hesitate? Which words did I repeat too often? Which sounds were unclear? Then I recorded the same topic again the next day, and I compared. Slowly, I noticed improvement, not dramatic, but real. The most important rule I made during that first month was this: I must speak English for at least 1 hour every single day. No excuses. If I was busy, I divided it into smaller sessions. 15 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon, 25 minutes at night. If I didn't have anyone to talk to, I talked to myself. If I felt tired, I reminded myself why I started. English was no longer optional. It was necessary. Around the third week, something surprising happened. I was walking outside, and I saw a man riding a bicycle. Without thinking, my mind said, "He's riding too fast. That road is dangerous." It happened automatically. I didn't force it. I didn't translate it. That was the first time I realized, my brain is changing. At the end of the first month, I tested myself again. I recorded a new answer to the scholarship interview question, "Why do you want to study abroad?" This time my sentences were longer, more connected, more natural. I still made mistakes, but I didn't freeze, and that was the difference. I wasn't fluent yet, but I was no longer silent, and that gave me something I had never had before: momentum. By the end of month 1, I had built something important: confidence, not fluency, not perfection, but confidence. I could speak without freezing. Now it was time to level up. I didn't want to just say basic sentences. I wanted to hold real conversations. I wanted to speak longer without stopping. So I created what I now call my real speaking system, and it had 4 powerful parts. 1. The question-answer expansion method. In month 1, I practiced survival sentences. In month 2, I trained my brain to think faster. Every day, I asked myself simple questions in English, but I forced myself to answer in detail. For example, question: "What did you do today?" At first, my answer was short: "I studied English." But that was not enough, so I expanded it. "I studied English for 1 hour." Then I expanded again. "I studied English for 1 hour because I want to improve my speaking skills." Then again, "I studied English for 1 hour because I want to improve my speaking skills and apply for international opportunities in the future." Every answer had to be longer than the previous one. This forced my brain to connect ideas. It trained me to build sentences naturally. Another example: question: "What are your future goals?" First answer: "I want to study abroad." Expanded: "I want to study abroad to gain international experience." Expanded again: "I want to study abroad to gain international experience, improve my professional skills, and build a global network." I practiced this every day for at least 30 minutes. After 2 weeks, I noticed something incredible. When I spoke, my sentences flowed more smoothly. I no longer stopped after 5 words. I could continue, and that changed everything. 2. The story building method. Next, I worked on creativity, because real conversations are not just answers, they are stories. So every day, I chose 5 random words. For example, opportunity challenge, confidence. Mistake, growth. Then I forced myself to create a short story using all 5 words. For example, I had an opportunity to apply for a scholarship, but I faced a big challenge because my English was weak. I made many mistakes during the interview, but that experience gave me confidence to improve and focus on growth. At first, it took me 5 minutes to create a simple story, but after a few weeks, I could create stories quickly. This trained my brain to connect vocabulary naturally. Instead of memorizing words separately, I used them together, and that made them stick. 3. The shadowing technique. Now let's talk about pronunciation. Even though I was speaking more, my accent was still strong. I wanted to sound clearer, more natural. So I started shadowing. Shadowing is simple but powerful. I chose short clips from interviews and podcasts. I listened to one sentence. I paused. Then I repeated it immediately, copying everything: speed, tone, emotion. If the speaker said, "I completely understand what you're saying," I didn't just repeat the words, I copied the rhythm. "I completely understand what you're saying." At first, I felt slow. I couldn't match the speed, but I repeated each sentence 10 times, then 15 times, then 20 times. After 1 month of daily shadowing, something surprising happened. When I spoke normally, my pronunciation improved automatically. I sounded smoother, more connected, not perfect, but much better. 4. The first real conversation. By the middle of month 3, I knew it was time. Practicing alone was safe. But real growth happens outside your comfort zone. So I joined an online English speaking group. The first session, I was nervous. My heart was beating fast again, just like the scholarship interview. But this time, something was different. I was prepared. When someone asked me, "What motivated you to improve your English?" I didn't freeze. I answered calmly. I told them about the scholarship rejection. I spoke for almost 2 minutes without stopping, and no one laughed. No one judged me. Instead, someone said, "That's inspiring." That moment felt bigger than any exam result, because for the first time in my life, I was expressing my thoughts clearly in English. Not perfectly, but confidently. After that day, I spoke online 3 times per week. Each conversation became easier. Each mistake became smaller. Each sentence became stronger. By the end of month 3, I was no longer the silent version of myself. I was someone who could enter a conversation and contribute. And that was the turning point. Because now, I wasn't just learning English. I was living it. By the end of month 3, I could speak. Not perfectly, but confidently. However, I noticed something important. Sometimes my sentences sounded unnatural. People understood me, but I could tell something was slightly wrong. Small grammar mistakes, wrong verb forms, incorrect prepositions, and I didn't want to just be understandable. I wanted to sound natural. So month 4 became my grammar in real life month. But I did not go back to heavy grammar books. Instead, I changed my strategy. 1. Learning grammar from patterns. Instead of studying grammar rules like present perfect is formed by have plus past participle, I started observing patterns. For example, I noticed native speakers often said, "I have been working on this project for 2 weeks." But in school, I had learned, "I am working on this project since 2 weeks." I realized something powerful. Real English and textbook English are sometimes different. So instead of memorizing rules, I started collecting real sentences. Whenever I heard a useful sentence in a podcast or interview, I wrote it down exactly as it was. Then, I practiced using that same structure. For example, original sentence. I have been learning English for 4 months. I created new versions. I have been practicing speaking every day. I have been preparing for this interview for 2 weeks. I have been improving step by step. By copying and adapting patterns, grammar became automatic, not theoretical, practical. 2. The preposition notebook prepositions used to confuse me. On the bus, but in the car. At night, but in the morning. Interested in, but good at. Why? Instead of asking why too much, I focused on exposure. I bought a small notebook. Every time I heard a confusing preposition, I wrote the full sentence, not just the word. For example, I'm interested in technology. She's good at solving problems. He arrived at the airport early. Then I created my own examples. I'm interested in improving my skills. I'm good at learning quickly. I arrived at the meeting on time. Slowly, patterns started forming in my mind, not because I memorized rules, but because I saw them repeatedly. 3. Sentence transformation. Practice. Next, I trained flexibility. I took one simple sentence and transformed it in different ways. For example, I applied for the scholarship. Then I changed it. I applied for the scholarship last year. I have applied for many scholarships. I will apply for another scholarship next month. I am applying for new opportunities. This exercise helped me feel comfortable with tenses. Instead of being scared of grammar, I played with it. I experimented, and grammar stopped feeling like a monster. 4. Daily journal writing. The most powerful habit of month 4 was journaling. Every night before sleeping, I wrote 1 page in English. At first, my writing was simple. Today, I practiced speaking. I felt tired but motivated. But I challenged myself. I asked, how would a native speaker say this? So I started reading blogs, short articles, and comments online. I noticed how they connected ideas. I began writing more naturally. Today, I practice speaking for an hour. Even though I felt tired after work, I pushed myself to continue because I know consistency is the key. After 2 weeks of journaling, something changed again. My speaking became clearer. Because writing forced me to organize my thoughts, and organized thoughts create better sentences. The small breakthrough. At the end of month 4, I joined another speaking session online. This time, something felt different. When I spoke, I didn't hesitate about grammar. I didn't think, is this present perfect or past simple? I just spoke. And later, when I listened to the recording, I realized something. My sentences were cleaner, more structured, more natural. Not perfect, but controlled. That was a small breakthrough. Not dramatic, not magical, but real. And real progress is what builds confidence. By now, I was no longer just practicing English. I was becoming someone who owned it. By the time month 5 began, something inside me had changed. I was no longer afraid of English, but I wasn't fully confident yet either. There was still one final barrier: real, unpredictable conversations. Up until now, most of my practice was controlled. I spoke to myself. I practiced with prepared topics. I joined small speaking groups. But real life is not controlled. People interrupt you. They speak fast. They change topics suddenly. So I decided it was time to push myself further. 1. Joining speaking groups. Regularly. I made a rule: 3 live conversations per week. No excuses. I joined international English-speaking groups online where people from different countries practiced together. The first sessions were uncomfortable. Some participants spoke very fast. Some had strong accents. Sometimes I didn't understand everything. Before, that would have destroyed my confidence. But now, instead of panicking, I did something different. I said, "Sorry, could you repeat that? Can you speak a little slower, please?" And guess what? They did. No one laughed. No one judged me. I realized something powerful. Most people are too focused on themselves to judge you. That realization reduced my fear dramatically. 2. Talking to strangers. Next, I challenged myself even more. I started speaking to strangers online, one-on-one conversations, no preparation, no script, just real discussion. At first, my heart still beat faster before clicking join call. But once the conversation started, I noticed something amazing. I wasn't translating anymore. When someone asked me, "What do you usually do in your free time?" my brain responded automatically. I usually read, practice English, and go for long walks to clear my mind. No pause, no mental translation. It just came. That moment felt incredible, because I knew this was different from before. In the scholarship interview, I knew the answer but couldn't say it. Now, I could say what I thought, immediately. That was real progress. 3. Fear became smaller. During month 5, I made many mistakes. Wrong verb forms, incorrect articles, mispronounced words. But something had changed. Mistakes no longer felt dangerous. They felt normal. One day I said, "He go to the university every day." The other person corrected me gently. "Oh, you mean he goes?" I smiled and repeated, "Yes, he goes to the university every day." And we continued the conversation. No embarrassment, no shame, just correction. And I realized something important. Fluency is not about never making mistakes, it's about continuing despite them. That mindset shift changed everything. 4. Thinking automatically in English. By month 6, I noticed something surprising. English thoughts were appearing without effort. When I saw a beautiful sunset, I didn't think, "How do I say this in English?" I simply thought, "The sky looks amazing tonight." When I was stressed, my mind said, "I need to calm down and focus." Even my internal conversations were in English. That was the final sign. English was no longer a subject. It had become a part of my thinking process. And when thinking changes, speaking changes naturally. The big test. Near the end of month 6, I did something brave. I watched the recording of my scholarship interview from months earlier. It was painful. I saw the hesitation, the fear, the silence. Then I recorded myself answering the same questions again. And when I compared both videos, it felt like two different people. The first version was insecure and blocked. The second version was calm, structured, expressive. Not perfect, but fluent. That was the moment I realized consistency works. Not motivation, not talent, not expensive courses. Consistency. And now I felt ready. Ready to face the opportunity that once defeated me. By the end of month 6, I felt ready. Not perfect, not like a native speaker, but ready. And life gave me a second chance. My university announced that the same international scholarship program would open again for the next academic year. When I saw the email, my heart beat faster. The same program, the same partner university, the same interview process. 6 months earlier, that opportunity had exposed my weakness. Now, it felt like a test of everything I had built. This time, I didn't hesitate. I applied again. But something was different. I didn't spend hours worrying about my English. Instead, I focused on refining my ideas, because I knew I could express them. 2 weeks later, I received another email. "You have been selected for the final interview." I read it calmly. No panic, no fear, just focus. On the day of the interview, I sat in front of my laptop. But this time my posture was different. My breathing was steady. The meeting started. 3 professors appeared on the screen. Different faces, but the same format. One of them smiled and said, "Good afternoon. Can you tell us why you're interested in this program?" 6 months ago, that question had paralyzed me. Now, I smiled and answered naturally. "I'm interested in this program because it offers international exposure and research opportunities that align with my long-term goals. I believe studying in a diverse academic environment will help me grow both professionally and personally." No translation, no panic, just flow. They asked about my academic interests. I explained them clearly. They asked about challenges I had faced. I told them about the previous rejection, honestly. I said, "Last year, I wasn't ready. That experience pushed me to improve myself, especially my communication skills. Since then, I've worked consistently to become more confident and prepared." One professor nodded. Another asked a follow-up question, and I answered it without hesitation. The conversation didn't feel like an interrogation. It felt like a discussion. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving an English conversation. I was participating in it. When the interview ended, I felt something new. Peace. Regardless of the result, I knew I had shown my real potential. 3 days later, I received another email, but this one started differently. Congratulations. I read the entire message slowly. I had been accepted. I sat there in silence for a few seconds. Then I smiled, not because of the scholarship alone, but because of the transformation. 6 months earlier, English had closed a door. Now it had opened one, and the only difference between those two moments was not talent. It was consistency. It was daily effort. It was refusing to stay the same. That acceptance email was not just a reward. It was proof. Proof that change is possible. Proof that discipline works. Proof that I was no longer the person who stayed silent. After I received the acceptance email, many people asked me the same question. How did you do it? They thought maybe I found a secret course, or a special teacher, or some shortcut. But the truth is simple. There was no secret. There were only principles. And these principles did not just change my English, they changed my life. Let me share them with you. 1. Mindset is everything. Before improving my English, I had to improve my mindset. For years, I told myself, my English is bad. I'm not good at speaking. I'm not confident. And when you repeat something long enough, you believe it. The day I changed my internal language, everything shifted. Instead of saying, I can't speak English, I said, I'm learning to speak English. Instead of, I'm bad at pronunciation, I said, I'm improving my pronunciation every day. That small shift created momentum. Your brain believes what you tell it. If you tell it you are incapable, it will act that way. If you tell it you are growing, it will look for progress. 2. Consistency over motivation. There were many days when I didn't feel motivated, days when I was tired, days when I wanted to skip practice. But I made a rule. Even on bad days, I must do something. Maybe only 15 minutes, maybe just journaling, maybe just shadowing one short video, but never 0. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. You don't need to study 5 hours one day and quit the next 3 days. You need steady effort. Small daily actions create massive long-term change. 3. Speak from day one. This was the biggest mistake I made in the past. I waited. I thought, first I'll learn grammar perfectly, then I'll speak. But perfection never arrives. The real progress began when I started speaking immediately. Even when I knew only simple sentences. Even when I made mistakes. Speaking trains your brain. It forces you to think faster. It exposes your weaknesses. And that is good. Because once you see your weaknesses, you can fix them. 4. Stop chasing. Perfection. Perfection is dangerous. It keeps you silent. It makes you afraid. I used to think, I'll speak when I sound perfect. But perfection is an illusion. Even native speakers make mistakes. Fluency is not about perfect grammar. It is about flow, confidence, clarity. When I stopped trying to sound perfect and focused on communicating clearly, my fear disappeared. And ironically, my English improved faster. 5. Surround yourself with English. I stopped treating English like a subject. I made it part of my environment. I changed my phone language to English. I watched interviews in English. I followed English-speaking content creators. I listened to podcasts while walking. I thought in English. I wrote in English. English was everywhere. And when something surrounds you daily, your brain adapts. Language is exposure. The more you feed your brain, the stronger it becomes. 6. The daily rule. If I had to choose one single reason for my transformation, it would be this. I created a non-negotiable daily rule. Every day, I must use English. Not study. Use, speak, listen actively, write, think. Every single day. No breaks, no excuses. Because improvement is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in ordinary days, quiet days, repeated days. That is what changed me. Not talent, not intelligence, not luck. Discipline. And if discipline worked for me, it can work for you. When I look back at the person I was 6 months ago, I almost don't recognize him. He was capable. He was intelligent. He had dreams. But he was afraid. Afraid of speaking. Afraid of mistakes. Afraid of judgment. The only difference between that version of me and who I am today is this. I decided to start, not when I felt ready, not when I felt confident, not when I had the perfect plan. I started when I was embarrassed. I started when I was frustrated. I started when I had failed. And that decision changed everything. So now let me ask you something. 6 months from now, who do you want to be? Do you want to still say, "My English is bad. I don't have confidence. I'll start next month"? Or do you want to say, "I did it. I improved. I didn't quit"? Imagine yourself 6 months from today. You're speaking smoothly. You're understanding movies without subtitles. You're participating in meetings confidently. You're applying for jobs without fear. That version of you is not imaginary. That version of you is built daily. One practice session at a time. One uncomfortable conversation at a time. One disciplined day at a time. You don't need expensive courses. You don't need to move abroad. You don't need to be perfect. You need consistency. You need courage. And you need to start right now. Because here's the truth. The pain of discipline is temporary, but the pain of regret lasts much longer. I was rejected once because of my English. Today, English opened doors for me. If I can transform in 6 months, you can too. This is not just about language. This is about confidence, opportunity, growth, freedom. Your journey does not start tomorrow. It starts today. Speak, listen, practice, repeat. And 6 months from now, your story will inspire someone else. Now it's your turn.